So first of all, thank you so much for coming this afternoon. My name is Lisa Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington State Micro Enterprise Association. And we're an organization that supports nonprofit organizations around the state who primarily focus on serving very, very small businesses. These are companies with 5 or fewer employees. They're in rural communities and urban communities. And what we know is that what's essential is business training and technical assistance, so the businesses know what they need to do to be profitable. But without financing, it's so much more difficult. So we've been around for the last 15 years or so. We are really strong collaborators with the Small Business Development Network, the Washington Economic Development Association, Department of Commerce, and all of our incredible microenterprise development organizations in the state. And gosh, it's good to see so many familiar names and people. So I want to just share with you that WSMA has partners all over the state who do microlending. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail about those partners where you can send your businesses that you serve for microloans. But today's conversation really is focused on the Flex Fund. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our 2 speakers. And what they're going to do is obviously introduce themselves with greater depth, but they're going to go through what the Flex Fund does, who it's for, who are ideal candidates, and that'll be done by Chuck Depew of National Development Council. And then we're going to have Michael Powell, who is here on behalf of the Business Impact Northwest. And he really is going to go through the mechanics of it, really help kind of demystify how it's used, who's perfect for it, and more importantly, how to refer the folks to this fund who are going to be ideal. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chuck Depew. And Chuck is with the National Development Council. It's a national nonprofit actually that provides economic and community development assistance with local governments. And for 30 years, NDC has worked with local jurisdictions and multiple housing and economic development efforts. Chuck, I'm going to give you time to introduce yourself and how this all got organized with the Department of Commerce, its background. But Chuck is an amazing asset to our state, has brought this incredible resource, and we're very grateful to have you here. So Chuck, go and introduce yourself and the Flex Fund.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. As you introduced, I'm Chuck Depew. I'm a senior director with the National Development Council. We're a 501c3 based in New York, though I work out of the Seattle area. NDC's been around for about 51 years now, doing a variety of things around economic development, community development. We've been working in Washington for a long, long time. Before joining NDC, I helped create the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development. So I'd worked at the local level, then with NDC was working within the Western United States, including Washington. NDC is unique. We do technical assistance and training, but we also have 2 CDFIs. We are one of a handful of nonprofit owners of an SBA lending license. So we are a preferred lender under their SBA 7A program. And like, Michael and Business Impact Northwest, we're very active in the PPP program, trying to provide capital to small businesses. And then we have a second CDFI, basically do lending that our SBA CDFI can't do. There's a narrow framework in which you can kind of fit the SBA needle for 7A. So we have an alternate CDFI that's involved, and that's the CDFI that's been involved in many of these similar funds. So it's almost, so I think what we're going to try and do today is I'll give you a little bit of a background on the Flex Fund, kind of walk you through kind of a live demo of the application portal so that you see how it works. And then Michael's with Business Impact Northwest, and Michael, you should introduce yourself kind of before we get started, and because they're really one of the lenders. So the idea is then The Flex Fund is really doing pre-application clearances, so it's kind of filtering businesses, trying to deliver more loan ready applicants to our CDFI partners, of which Business Impact Northwest is one of them. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Thanks, Chuck. Michael Powell with Business Impact Northwest. We're a CDFI lender, and we're happy to be involved in this program and to be able to provide assistance to the small businesses in the state of Washington that are really in need of this access of capital.
And then what I'll do is,
Chuck, while you're getting your slide presentation ready, I want to make sure everyone knows that this presentation is really for providers. I know we have a few businesses in the room, but this is an opportunity for you as providers of technical assistance and financing to ask these folks questions. So the questions we'll have at the end of both of their presentations. Okay, Chuck, go ahead.
yeah, and it's almost 12 months to the day when we started talking about continued business recovery. NDC had been a partner with the state on many of the business grants that different jurisdictions have been doing around the country to try and help with business recovery. We started to talk last summer about larger scale efforts. At the time, we kind of figured nobody was sure when we were going to kind of exit the pandemic, but we knew that businesses would need more amounts of capital to recover, and that because at a minimum there's a lot of expenses business have been accruing but not paying. So as they come out of the pandemic, they're not only in the negative in terms of revenue, but they're in the negative on expenses that have been accruing, that now they've got some bills to owe. And we were trying to find a way to be able to fill that niche in a way that could be cost effective, but probably had to be debt, that we just didn't think that we could continue to, and I'm just going to get rid of the cat, continue to kind of fund that level of recovery with grant funds. So we started talking at that time. We, NDC, were involved with a similar effort in New York called the New York Forward Fund, which was the kind of second of these. The city of Chicago did one. It was really partnering with Connected Capital, which is a nonprofit in Minneapolis that provides a platform for lending, and then Calvert Impact Capital in terms of raising capital. And the idea was to try and do a couple things: provide real kind of flexible criteria, kind of lower cost financing for businesses, while also partnering within the CDFI community. Because we wanted to make sure that CDFIs were part of the recovery. CDFIs have a unique way of being able to work with borrowers than traditional lenders, but we also needed CDFIs to kind of get to scale. That a lot of the challenges CDFIs have had in the country is all of them have very different product lines, so it's hard for businesses to fully understand them, because it is kind of more of a kind of a tailored opportunity. And getting to scale has been a challenge, and that challenge on scale also limits CDFI's ability to get other funds through the CDFI fund. So we wanted to try and do a couple things: help businesses recover with lower cost capital, help CDFIs get to scale, and kind of reinvigorate their balance sheets. So what we're really trying to do is we're moving out of the PPP program and the EIDL world. EIDL is kind of the other competitive product in a way that SBA runs. SBA is looking to modify their EIDL program soon. But again, those programs are only available through the end of this year. And we're into recovery loan funds. So we're looking at a program where the loan size is tied to revenue, kind of a 6-month kind of a revenue projection for businesses. So we're not rationing. We're not rationing the loan size based on benefiting the most businesses. We're trying to help fewer businesses, but in a more meaningful way. Again, looking at more flexible working capital to allow businesses to recover. So not so much fixed asset financing, but really the working needs of the business as they grow. They got to buy equipment. They have to reemploy, reestablish their supply chains. It also helps us on the underwriting, because now we're not underwriting fixed assets, and that always takes a bit longer for folks to do. We're outreaching through lots of organizations in the state, like this one with your membership. We're working with ADOs and we and other groups as well, we'll be starting a kind of a robust communication strategy with a lot of groups to get the word out and partnering with local governments to try and get the word out. And again, the lenders in our case are CDFI. So the fund isn't doing the lending. The CDFIs are doing the lending. The fund is buying that loan. So what the fund is doing is organizing capital, creating a centralized kind of application process. We've got some TA providers, we've organized capital, we have our kind of our online application platform. Then we're using those CDFI partners to do the lending because they're the best ones, we believe, to create that relationship with businesses and make a loan. So it's their loan, it's their criteria, it's them acting the way they normally act in helping businesses, with the idea that the businesses are going to get easier access to capital. The businesses that we're targeting are under 3 million in revenue, less than 50 employees. So kind of like the typical small business, Main Street business that we think of. Again, that size represents 96% of Washington's businesses. Key thing here is we're really focused on existing businesses. The business has to have been in business for at least 12 months prior to the application. They have to be able to at least certify to some impact from COVID. The Flex Fund is not really a startup funding source. It's for existing businesses. It could be for businesses that closed and now they're reopening, or for businesses who are pivoting, but they have to be an existing business. At some point, we'll start to open up opportunities potentially for some startups based on expertise that some of our CDFIs have in working with startups. So CDFIs, if you don't know, and this is just a quick blurb, obviously they're mission driven, they're providing lending in lots of different circumstances, predominantly focused, again, 60% of CDFI lending under their certification is either the low income census tracts or to minority owned businesses. So we're looking at a lenders network that is much more focused in communities that were not able to access a lot of capital during the PPP period, as well as traditional bank lending. Washington State generally has not had a very robust CDFI industry. I think some of that is because of our conservative constitution, but we have some very good ones. And so we reached out to a lot of the larger CDFIs, frankly, who could handle loan volume. Some smaller ones are involved, but they're still kind of on the sidelines to a certain point, waiting to see how this works, because they were worried about kind of dealing with that kind of loan volume. So the ones right now that are up and running is, again, NDC through one of our CDFIs, Business Impact Northwest, Michael is from, Evergreen Business Capital, which is a CDFI component to Evergreen. They are traditionally, they're a 504 lender in Washington State. Craft 3, most of you probably know Craft 3. They'll actually start receiving applications in mid-August. And then Ascendus, we invited in. They were previously the Axion East CDFI out of New York. They've been involved in the other funds. They have a particular niche within micro businesses. That's really who they lend to. We wanted someone who was really focused in that niche within the fund. The executive director actually grew up in Washington State, went to the UW. So we kind of think of him as a local, even if he has a New York accent every now and then. And we are likely to involve more in the future. We needed a handful that we could really get up to speed. NDC is creating some correspondent relationships with smaller CDFIs to allow them to participate. And then we'll add more as they're comfortable meeting the needs of the program and then getting up to scale. The loan terms themselves, as we mentioned, we've got two products. We've got a 60-month term and a 72-month term. For the first 6 months of the program, businesses can ask for a 72-month term. So it's not available all the time, and it won't be available after 6 months. So it's 6 years rather. So 6 years, it's a 4.5%, 3.5% for nonprofits because nonprofits are eligible. And the 60-month term is at 4%, again, 3% for nonprofits. First year is interest only. So first 12 months is insurance, then the loan is being repaid over the balance of the term. Can use the proceeds for working capital. We are allowing some refinancing based on specific CDFI interests and confirmation, but it's really, again, those working capital needs. Generally, in terms of recourse, we're not securing assets directly. We are providing a blanket lien on assets and a personal guarantee of the business owner. Again, it's not secured in anything, so we recognize it's a relatively weak form of collateral. But the personal guarantee is really important to the lenders because, again, it kind of confirms that character intent on the business owner. There's no upfront fees, so no fees that the CDFIs are charging, and no fees to the businesses. The fund is absorbing all those. And again, the loan is basically sized at 6 months of operating revenue or $150,000. So they can go back any 6-month period they want. In terms of sizing that loan, the CDFIs are obviously going to be sizing the loan based on what the business can repay. But that's kind of the basic things. We didn't want to get into a lot of complicated formulas of what you can count and what you can't count. It's just 6 months of revenue or $150,000. So we've got a simple application platform that I'll walk you through here in a second. It's fairly straightforward. Again, the platform is a pre-application. So it doesn't require a lot of information, it doesn't require any attachments. So it's not like some other platforms. It's really trying to ask some questions to filter the business to allow more, I guess, more qualified businesses to work directly with the CDFIs. So we recognize we're bringing a lot of volume to CDFIs. We want to make sure at least the folks that are kind of in their queue are as able as possible, and we've filtered out some things.
Hey, Chuck, there was a quick question in the chat, whether or not there's any prepayment penalties.
No prepayment penalty. So, business wants to prepay, no problems, no prepayment penalty at all. So we're okay with that. Again, we're trying to be very business friendly as best we can. And then this is frozen. Oh, there we go. So this is kind of where we're at now. We launched on June 30th. We actually didn't get as much media attention as we thought we would. So we're really kind of gearing up a communication strategy now. But as you can see already, we actually have about $135 million of applications. 104 million has been matched. So a person applies. If they can answer their questions all in the right way, then they'll be matched with the CDFI, and you'll see that when we go through the demo. So the business will get us, they'll get a handful of CDFIs that match with them. They'll choose who they want to work with, and then that CDFI will start that process. So we think, at least in terms of the application, we're getting about 75% of applications getting matched. The good thing is the application isn't weeding out too many applicants. Obviously, the key is, whether we're not weeding out enough based on the CDFI needs, but this thing can get polished up over time. 1,070 matched requests. So the average loan is a little bit under $100,000. So well above kind of the PPP average that we saw. So far now, the CDFIs are starting to actually make loans. So I know we at NDC, we actually closed on 2 loans at $300,000. I know some other CDFIs are now starting to finalize their underwriting and actually closing and making loans. So kind of 3 weeks after application, a loan decision is being made. So again, the idea is that it can be much more straightforward in terms of the underwriting, much more straightforward in terms of the decision process for CDFIs. And the better news, at least from our standpoint, is the demographics we're seeing from our applicants, recognizing we haven't yet tried to focus specifically in certain geographies or certain sectors or certain ethnic communities. But we're seeing the vast majority, as you can see here, the number of applicants that are women, the number of non-white business owners, the vast majority, over 50%, are minority business owners. When we look at, our traditional kind of WMBE terminology, it's 75%. So what we're seeing, at least, is the fund was trying to create a low bar for business access so that we can reach as many low-income borrowers as well as minority business owners as possible. And so far, at least, without a lot of intentionality yet with our marketing, those are the folks that we're seeing. And I think part of that is everybody's been, become very familiar with online applications, with those business grants. I think a lot of businesses were really ready for this. So the key is going to be once we start making loans. But so far, we're getting good volume coming through the portal, and the demographics of the applicants is astounding for us. We love seeing these kinds of numbers. And then the other part of what our process is we've also, got under contract a series of technical assistance providers. The idea is, at least for businesses that want some help going into the application, we've got help for them, kind of coaching on the way, and mainly for businesses that don't get a loan. So if they're not able to get a loan, then the idea is we would, the CDFI would know why. And if that why is solvable, we need better financials, or we need a better thing about this to be able to make a decision. Then the idea is to kind of partner that business with one of our TA providers to work on that specific thing. And then once that thing is resolved, then they can go right back in line where they were before, to continue the credit process. So we're trying to make sure that if people, in a sense, end up not getting a loan, if there's a good solvable reason why that is, then we can try and take care of that immediately, to give people kind of a second chance at that loan decision. I think. So Lisa, I don't know if we want to take questions now, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the portal. So do we want to take questions after that, or do you want to do it now?
I think it might be helpful. There was one question, if you could just distinguish one more time the difference between the nonprofit terms and the for-profit terms.
Yeah, the main difference is the interest rate. So a nonprofit, obviously there's different criteria in terms of revenue, but the real difference is they would be charged a 3% interest rate on a 5-year loan and a 3.5% interest rate on a 6-year loan. So they're getting 100 basis point discount from what the for-profit business would pay.
Wonderful. And then there was a question about the language capacity of your TA providers. Who are your key TA providers?
This is the group of them. We have pretty good language spread. Most of the TA is going to be organized through Business Impact Northwest. They have a pretty good kind of a referral system with access to languages. We still haven't solved that problem, but we're attentive to it. Most of the TA providers here have had experience over the last 1.5 years with applications on grants and things, and most of them do have some level of language capacity. Most of them have Spanish, and some have some other language capacity.
And are there opportunities for other TA providers to be a part of this network?
Not yet, because we're trying to get this up and running to work out the bugs. So probably at some point, my guess is going to be later this fall, we'll start to do some evaluations of the first 4 months or so. We'll look at programmatically, are we hitting the right place? How are our CDFIs doing in terms of capacity? How are our TA providers doing? And then we'll be in a position to make some adjustments as necessary to keep the program robust and delivering for businesses. To be honest with you, Lisa, with all of the work going on within the TA industry in Washington State, I kind of wanted to stay out of that as best as I can.
Sure.
Because at least I have a self-interest in this loan process, and didn't want to get caught up in all of the other things that are going on for good reasons, but just didn't want to get caught up in it.
Well, at some point, there's a lot of providers on this call, and there's a couple of comments just on how to get into that space. There was another question, whether or not there's a low income requirement. Many middle income businesses can take advantage because the use of federal dollars is usually income restricted. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, there's no limitation on that. We have the business size. After that, again, CDFIs have to have the majority of their lending go either to low income geographies or to minority owned businesses. But right now, we think with the number of CDFIs we have, we'll be able to have coverage for businesses that don't meet that narrower CDFI criteria. So right now, we're not excluding any business that meets that size threshold.
Okay, so there's a question here by a nonprofit that has a fiscal sponsor, and would it be better for the fiscal sponsor to apply for that loan? And we can take this offline as well.
Yeah, the applicant has to be who's going to be the borrower. So who's going to be accountable for, for meeting the underwriting criteria and then being responsible for repayment on the loan. So that's who has to be the applicant.
Okay. There was also just a question of whether or not this slide deck will be shared. We will share this. We'll share the chat and a link to this webinar. And I think this is a good time to, oh yeah, there's one quick question. Can you comment more on how local TA providers can or should be navigating applicants?
Yeah, I think, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of walk through the application for people so they could see, because obviously everyone who's involved with businesses, in some form, our hope is that they see this as a resource for their clients and that they're helping their clients access the resource. So there would be nothing that would preclude them from being involved in any of those decisions, even if they're not, kind of directly contracted to the fund to provide specific help.
Got it. Yeah, I think this is a good time to move over to Michael. And I don't know if you want to end your share screen. Michael, do you have a slide deck?
We're gonna get to Michael in a second. I'm gonna walk through the application. So this is the process people will go through. And then when this is done, then that's where they would then work with Michael.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, this is the Flex Fund portal. So we created this on behalf of the program. It's smallbusinessflexfund.org. So it has a lot of information and stuff. The one thing that's cool about this, and this is where again we've been learning from other funds, this landing page actually is in different languages. So on the right-hand side, you can see we have a landing page. So when you get here, you would see it in English in this way. Now, what we've done, kind of unique to what's happened in the past and with other funds, is we've actually organized this landing page in languages. So you can just go to the right-hand side, and if you want it in Chinese, you can just click on that, and you'll see the landing page in Chinese or in Spanish. And I mean, we took kind of the 7 most common languages in Washington State, and the landing page is in that language for people. So rather than just depend on whatever their browser is set to, we actually created landing pages that are in those languages. Once they get into the application, then they would be dependent on what their browser is set to, because the application itself is in English. So business or anybody coming to the site, so they would get to this landing page. Scroll down and get information, or if they're ready to apply, they just click on apply now. Give them some more information. And then at the bottom starts the application. And this is mobile enabled, so people can do it from their cell phone, or they can do it from their computer. So these kind of pre-application questions, so how much is someone looking for? I'll just say $75,000. When do I want it? I want it within the next month or 2. Name of the business, I'll just say best. The business type, so it's a sole proprietor, corporation, nonprofit, or other. So I'm a sole proprietor. The industry, and I'm going to say business services. And how long have I been in business? I'm going to say 3+ years. So all of those are kind of simple, straightforward. A business owner we would think would know, be able to answer those. I'll just put my own address in there. Again, the key is the address needs to be where the business is located, and the business has to be in Washington State to be eligible. then who's the business owner? At some point, like the other programs where we would require them, they'll have to submit information on any other owners that own more than 20% of the business. Not necessary for our process, but they would need to do that. I want them to contact me by email, and I prefer mornings for that contact. Then how much revenue? Again, there's no documentation required, so it's just, just let us give us your best sense. So I made I'll say I made 100,000. Did I earn a profit? Neither of these answers will bounce you out of the system. So we expect that a lot of businesses didn't earn a profit in 2019. We just want to know. But I'll just say no, I didn't make a profit in 2019. How many employees do I have? I'm going to say 3. And do I have any bankruptcies? Again, not, we do have CDFIs that will work with borrowers that have had bankruptcies before. So this doesn't bounce someone from the system, but we just want to know. I'm going to say no prior bankruptcies. And then if I did have collateral to support the loan, what would that collateral look like? And I'm going to say none. And then how much do I expect to make in 2021? I think I'm going to make $250,000. Do I have a business plan or a market analysis? Yes or no? Again, neither answer will bounce you from the system. Some CDFIs don't require a business plan as part of their process. Some do. So again, it's just giving information to the CDFI so they're better prepared when they connect with the borrower. So do I identify myself in a different way? Again, this would not bounce you out of the system. If you said yes, then there would be a list of that someone could click on. Again, it's important to us to be able to identify the different borrowers that we have. I'm going to say no. Well, first I'll say if it's yes. So if I click yes, this is the choices. We are in the process now of modifying this. We've recognized that some people can select yes. I am a person. I want to identify a different way, but I don't want to tell you what that is. I mean, it's perfectly within their rights not to disclose that. So we're going to be adding a box for people that do check yes, but they don't want to disclose. And I'm just going to click other just to move through this. And then credit score. There are, CDFIs are using some credit scores as part of their process. There's no minimum. Again, we're not asking for confirmation yet. So it's just what the business owner thinks their credit score is. So I'm going to say 580. So now the portal is taking that application and is now matching each of our lenders, the CDFIs. They all have the same loan product. So now, at least in Washington State under the Flex Fund, we have 5 CDFIs, all with the same loan product. So there's no confusion of I want that product or this product. But each of them has a different way in which they go about serving businesses. So in this case, because of some of the questions that I answered, Ascendus was recommended to me. Now, in some cases, you might have 2 or all of the CDFIs might be on this list. And then you would choose who do you want to connect to. So if you click connect, then I don't want to, I'll go ahead and I'll put that in there. So now Ascendus now has an email letting them know that I've been matched with them and I want to talk. So this is giving you a little information about what that communication is going to be. Ascendus is now going to reach out to that business based on how they said they wanted to get contacted. And then that will start the process. So on the other side of this email is Michael at Business Impact Northwest. So Michael, probably now is kind of the best time. So when you get this now how does Business Impact Northwest start working with the business?
Thanks, Chuck. So at this juncture, when this comes into us, we basically will take the information that's provided and we'll do a quick review of that. Basically, as Chuck says, ahead of time, based upon the way that we've set up kind of our criteria for the product, if you match with Business Impact Northwest, there's a very high likelihood that, provided the information bears out and is verified, that we could move forward with it. So once we do, again, as Chuck said, for your clients, if they go through this process, this is kind of a pre-application. They haven't actually formally applied yet. So what we would do is we would reach out to your clients and basically start the process of an application, which would mean requesting from them an authorization to pull a credit report. It's one of the things that's part of our underwriting criteria. And we would ask them for some basic information. For us, that would be 2 years of personal tax business tax returns, just so that we can look at what the revenues are, confirm that. Also, based upon the way the fund is set up, the amount of the loan is partially based upon what those revenues are. So by getting that information, we're able to confirm that and see where the loan amount may be set, so that then in conversation with the borrower, we can then match those expectations, so that if they said, I'm looking for 75,000, say they were only qualified for 45, we can have those conversations early on instead of way down the road in the process with that particular borrower. Once that borrower receives our information asking them for the authorization to pull the credit, and they send back that information to us, that's the formal application. When we get that, we then begin our underwriting process for them, of going through, based upon our underwriting criteria, of looking at, do they qualify based upon what we've got set up, and if they don't. Again, as Chuck mentioned, if they don't, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the end for them. You know, if they don't happen to qualify, and if there are solvable issues, so whether it be an issue with credit, whether it be an issue with, we're not really understanding your financials that you provided us. Maybe they only have internally prepared P&L and balance sheets that they provide us. We can then refer them to a technical assistance provider that can work with them on solving that, and then referring it back and putting it back into the loan process. Once we've gone through that writing process and we're able to qualify them or approve them, then we would basically reach out to that client, let them know what they're qualified for as far as the dollar amount, and we would then prepare the loan documents for them. For us, as it's probably common for a lot of providers, we do a lot of this in electronic means. So we will forward loan documents in an electronic manner for them to be reviewed and be signed by that client. Once they return those to us, that's their indication that they're accepting the terms that we provided them and they want to move forward. We can then process their loan request and distribute the funds to them. For us, that's primarily done via automatic clearinghouse and ACH. If they want to request a check, an official check, we can do that as well. But the most expedient means of doing that is through an ACH process. And that pretty much is what happens. Again, the way this is set up is it's a very streamlined process. Again, we want to make it easy for these businesses to gain access to capital. A lot of them have high barriers of entry if they go through a traditional bank or any other process to try and access capital. And what this does is provide an easier method for them, a more streamlined method for them that fits our criteria, allows us to continue to do lending in a safe and sound manner, but to get funds out quickly and have the greatest impact in the communities that we serve.
And just one thing, Michael, is to start to answer some of the questions in the chat. So obviously the Flex Fund is a product, working capital, 6 months revenue up to 150,000 for working capital needs. So straightforward. It's not intended to be the financing solution for everything that small businesses need. So Business Impact Northwest has your other products as well. So I know there was a question about real estate. Someone wanted to buy something. I mean, they would be able to still talk with Business Impact Northwest or other CDFIs that are doing a lot of those other kind of lending things as well. It's just not necessarily through the Flex Fund.
Absolutely, that's correct. And what we foresee is that there may be a hybrid where they come in initially through the Flex Fund portal. We look at it, we have conversations with them, and maybe there's a portion of their funding need that can be satisfied through the Flex Fund for those working capital needs. Maybe they need to replenish equipment, inventory, those sorts of things. And then on a secondary basis, we can then look at additional ancillary needs that they may have, whether it be for the purchase of real estate. Maybe they, through this pandemic, have an opportunity to acquire a competitor that didn't make it, that they can expand their footprint. So yes.
Yeah, and I would say, like, one of the questions. So the Flex Fund is really based on a premise that if you were in business before COVID and were profitable, we know everybody had a hard time during COVID. Some did better than others, and a lot of them pivoted in ways that were really good for their business. So we're kind of underwriting in a way. We're evaluating the character of the borrower, and were they successful before? And if they were successful before, then there's the likelihood that you can find a way to make a loan to them. So that's why we're not really focused on startups, because if you don't have a cash flow history, it's really hard for any of us that are lenders to provide an underwriting to a business that doesn't have revenues. So those are still going to be within those specialized, startup lending sources that are much more experienced at evaluating a business. And you guys do some startup funding, don't you, Michael?
We do some startup funding. So that's one of our core lending type of things that we do. So we'll look at that. We also do established businesses as well. So there are other opportunities which may not be through the Flex Fund, that as you have clients that come to you, you can refer them either directly, or if they come through the portal, as we have conversations with them, we can have those discussions to determine what is the best method for providing them the capital that they may need. So again, to the point of, if you happen to have a startup that comes to you, refer them to the Flex Fund wouldn't necessarily be the appropriate method, but reaching out to one of the CDFIs that is involved in the program could be a good resource for them.
I'd like to just add one quick thing here, if that's okay. WSMA has several microlenders as a part of our network. And these are on our website. There's a link right now, but I just want to kind of go through some of those for those on the call today who may have businesses not ready for the Flex Fund, but are ready for a small microloan, 10,000 up to 25 or 30,000 or more. So one of them, just to take a look at, is SNAP, or the Spokane Neighborhood Association Partners. They're in Spokane. They are they do a lot of lending, and they're available for very small microloans. Also up in Colville is the Tri-County Economic Development District. They do a lot of microlending, I think in 10 counties in Eastern Washington. Also the Northwest Native Development Fund does a lot of microlending. They're up on the Colville Tribe. And rural, RCDR, Rural Community Development Resources, they're actually down in Yakima and also serve that kind of middle swath of the counties in Washington State. Ventures, who was listed as a technical assistance provider, they do lending in Spanish as well as RCDR. Both of those are Spanish language microlenders. Enterprise for Equity down in the South Sound, they serve a 9-county region. They do microlending. Seattle Business Education Hub, also a microlender. New Roots Fund actually does microlending for refugees up in the Seattle area. And the Northwest Access Fund is one of our key partners. They do microlending for entrepreneurs with disabilities. And so I hope Shri got those in the chat. Just make sure you know the full kind of broad swath of microlenders in Washington State, so that you can help kind of marshal the process for these entrepreneurs who may have capital needs that are different than what the Flex Fund is. I hope that made sense, Michael. Hey, Chuck, there was a question early on by Martha who talked about investing She asked the question with how it would be useful for cities who are interested in investing in the Flex Fund. You know, what the ROI is for them. And would there be any assurances that their capital investment could be focused in the region where they are for the businesses in their area?
Yeah, I mean, we're having a number of conversations with various jurisdictions, you know, some of whom we're looking at creating their own revolving loan fund. And, you know, to me, it makes much more sense to jump on an existing RLF. You know, so any of those dollars, depending on what the requirements are, we can control how those funds are used. So jurisdictions are getting the benefit of kind of lending capacity within that jurisdiction. So the best examples we've had in other funds is down in California with the California Rebuilding Fund. The city of Santa Clara provided loan capital. The loan capital increases the fund. I mean, we think we're capitalized to about 100 million. Additional funds just allow us to go above 100 million. Santa Clara invested because they didn't think that they would get their fair share of businesses. And at least the net result is, by having an investor that's working with us, that's intentional around how we connect businesses in their jurisdiction, as well as we can direct some of our marketing and communication strategy to support that effort. They actually got they got double, in a sense, the proportion of business applications than what their population would warrant. So we can provide, you know, direct benefits to jurisdictions that provide capital for us. I mean, the return is really that they're going to get more businesses funded within their area, right? I mean, I think right now we're in this midst of, you know, restarting. I think businesses need help now rather than, say, a year or two from now. You know, you can't determine the future, but we know what the present is. So it just helps them get more businesses, you know, invested within their area.
Great. I know that there were several.
And I was going to say, Lisa,
yeah.
when we can provide a return on their capital, you know, and in the future we can return their capital to them, you know, depending on losses. So we can give them the added benefit of actually being able to kind of reuse that dollar twice. You know, right now for a business, and then potentially in the future when the loan is repaid, then they would be able to reuse that dollar for some other activity, or just continue the lending activity, whichever they prefer to do.
So there's a question for either of you. It's from Yumiko. What's the typical size, loan size for a nonprofit with 500,000 in revenue? It would depend, I guess, depend on their need, but do you have a comment on that, either of you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, to be honest with you. I mean, we have about 5 million in applications for nonprofits, with that average loan size being around $95,000. But I don't think we have any kind of estimate of kind of what an average loan size would be, because it really depends on what's the revenue they're trying to bridge for.
Right. So I think it would be really valuable to open this up to the whole body. We can do this in chat, and I think that's important. I have a bunch of questions. I know that others may have some. I'd like to open it up, if you're okay with that, to questions from the group, to just unmute yourself and ask your question. And so it looks like Martha has one right now. Martha, you want to just ask it to the panelists?
Sure, I actually have a couple of questions. Thank you. This one that I just clicked send on is, I'm from the city of Kirkland, so representing an investment point of view, perhaps, at least right now, as we consider whether or not our city can and will invest in the Flex Fund. So one question is, if we use American Recovery Act funding, is it known? Do you guys know whether or not it's acceptable under the rules of ARPA to be repaid that initial investment?
No, the latest FAQ that's put up by Treasury, it's dated July 14th. They've actually provided really good clarification that, you know, grants and loans to businesses are perfectly okay. There's other guidance. Unfortunately, it's kind of in an area around the infrastructure financing, but they mentioned small business, where for loans that are made with terms before the end of 2026, because ARPA money ends the end of 2026. So if you receive repayments on a loan, so you make a loan to us, we make a loan to the businesses, you'll collect some interest during that period of time, but the loan itself won't get repaid till after 2026. Any monies repaid to you inside 2026 is program income and has to be reused for the same purpose. So you probably would just keep that money in the fund and just revolve it. Any monies returned after that, loan terms after 26, lose their federal identity entirely.
Okay.
So at that point, kind of then the money becomes yours, and whatever the city wants to do, the city can do, because there's no federal identity to that money at that point beyond 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else with questions?
I have a question. This is Ronita. Can you apply for multiple businesses?
Yeah, you can. I think we have a cap of 2 locations, but I can confirm that. But we recognize for some businesses they have multiple establishments, and that's okay.
And what about individuals that's, well, this would be someone starting up a business, so never mind.
Okay, so I am curious, see, there was a question about ancient bankruptcies that are no longer credit. I think you answered that question in the chat. So going back to, there are several questions about providers. Who is a part of the organizing or decision-making body that kind of decides what technical assistance providers are available or can be in on supporting this effort?
Well, the NDC is the fund manager.
Okay.
We created a special entity to do that with Commerce involved in that organization. So it's really, to be honest with you, it's myself and Commerce.
Okay, and so you said not at this point, but there may be an opportunity for other TA providers to get in on this.
Yeah, I think right now we need to just digest this and figure out how it works. So again, I think it's going to be like late fall. We'll start to do some evaluations of where we're at that time, what's worked, what's not worked, and how do we need to make any pivots.
Great.
This is Ronita again. So how long would this program be open, as long as funds are available, or is this okay?
Yeah, we would expect. I mean, again, you never really know, how, what's going to be the conversion rate. Business Impact Northwest is getting a lot of applications. Not all of those applications are going to lead to a loan. So we're going to keep this open as long as we have funds. I mean, we do think that there'll be some continued funding beyond this initial round. So we're projecting lending like over the next, at least until the next 9 to 12 months. Could happen faster, could happen slower. We just don't know that at this point. The main thing is after the first 6 months, then businesses only have a 60-month term available to them. They can't ask for a 72-month term.
Okay, now will this be in a collaboration with what the SBA have going on with the hub with the navigators, and kind of you guys are gonna see how that fit in with the technical assistant providers and try to do something around that?
Well, I think we'll see, because that's one of the reasons why we needed some specific help right now to make sure that we can be effective. There's all this other activity going on with, the Navigator Grant Program, other evaluations in TA. That's all good work going on, but it's kind of everybody's busy. and they're somewhat distracted. So once that gets worked out, if there's a place to fit that in, then I think we would want to fit that in there. But we don't know what that is right now. But we're open to exploring that once there's more certainty over what those decisions are.
Michael, there's a question in here for you. Is there information about your loan product for down payment assistance on commercial real estate available on your website that you can share a link for the group here today?
I don't happen to have that link right handy, but I will, while we're discussing, look for that and drop it in the chat.
Wonderful. There's another question by an entrepreneur who has both a paint company and a hair salon. And she's asking if she can apply for both. I think it sounds
so long
like
as they have different, I think so long as they have different identities, that would be okay.
Great. Any other questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm, I was a little confused in the beginning, so sorry if I think this has already been answered. But I'd just like to confirm, so is the Flex Fund essentially just like a middleman, basically serving as a middleman between the Northwest, the Impact, sorry, go back to my notes, the Business Impact Northwest, and then are they there is the Flex Fund to be utilized if Business Impact Northwest can't approve a certain loan for certain things, or can I just get a little bit more clarification on that?
Yeah, basically the Flex Fund the Flex Fund is a centralized entity to organize capital on behalf of CDFI lenders. So we're raising capital. We've kind of created the product criteria, at least the minimum that's necessary for us to then buy loans from CDFIs. So CDFIs still do the underwriting that they need to do for their organization requirements, but in a sense, there's limits there's limits on what kind of a loan they can provide based on what we'll buy from them. So it's created a standardized product. So we end up buying 95% of the loan that Michael originates. So that has a couple of different benefits. It allows Business Impact Northwest to do what they do, which is underwrite businesses with whatever flexibility they feel is necessary. There's boundaries that they can't go beyond for our purposes. Most of the time, those boundaries are less intrusive than their own requirements. And then we'll buy 95% of that loan. So now we're returning capital back to Business Impact Northwest for them to do continued lending. And then they're servicing and maintaining the relationship with the borrower. So you're right. I mean, the Flex Fund is really an intermediary, kind of managing those activities. There could be later, not right now, there could be later areas where the Flex Fund may do different kinds of loan products. Because the centralized capital structure, centralized administrative structure is just really efficient, and less costly. Okay. But we really are an intermediary right now.
Okay, and then just following up on you saying that you're an intermediary, there was something you guys mentioned about the Flex Fund. So I remember you guys talking about how certain loans, they wouldn't be approved, stuff like maybe equipment and stuff like that. And then you mentioned something about the Flex Fund and something about resources that the Flex Fund may have for those type of loans. Do you recall that?
Well, I think the key thing is we're trying to lend to working capital rather than fixed asset. I mean, equipment gets into a gray area in terms of, what is the equipment? I mean, because normally we're trying to not have to look at underwriting the value of that equipment and then having collateral on that equipment. But what can happen is the CDFI that you're matched with. So when you're working with Michael, he can be looking at a Flex Fund loan product for working capital, and he can be looking at a side-by-side loan for those other things that Business Impact Northwest will make a loan for. That's not part of the Flex Fund, but that's perfectly okay as well. So he can conceivably, and all of the CDFI partners can conceivably use that conversation to meet your business needs, even if all of it doesn't meet the criteria for the Flex Fund. we're just trying to make it easy for working capital lending.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying that. Sorry if it was a little repetitive.
No, it's a good one because we do know there's other needs for businesses and expansion. And we wanted to make sure that the CDFI partners, there's no limitations on other loan products that they manage and do, and their ability to provide those products for borrowers.
Thank you, Chuck. And I want to take a moment to just acknowledge that this event is brought to you by the Washington State Microenterprise Association in collaboration with a Black-owned Business Excellence, which is a nonprofit serving Black-owned businesses. We're going to be having an event on August 3rd from 11 to 1 that's really about for businesses to ask these gnarly questions. So I think she can put a link to that event also in the chat. I also wanted to just say that Department of Commerce and SBDC is a part of making sure we could put on this event today. I want to thank them heartily for that. Alyssa, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. I have a question about the demographics for you, Chuck. I'm just curious. I know that you showed us the breakout earlier, and I appreciate you sharing that. I'm curious, as Lisa said, there are folks from the Black-owned Business Excellence group here, and I'm wondering how the demographics are being monitored and how quickly the response will be if it's noticed that certain communities that have been identified as being left out of past funds like this, how quickly the response will be, and in particular, Black African-American businesses, also Hispanic businesses.
Yeah, well, I would say, to be honest with you, we're looking at our metrics daily. I mean, again, once we kind of get going with our communication strategy, there will be more intentionality, media buys in certain markets, again, trying to access businesses where, what we've learned over the last year and a half in terms of the best way of providing information to businesses. So I can say we'll be very attentive to it. I mean, it's always an interesting challenge in the lending world where federal laws that kind of protect discrimination against folks are the same laws that protect, their identity from disclosure. So all of the CDFIs have that mission in terms of their lending. So we're all of us, the CDFI partners, as well as us at the fund level, we're monitoring it all the time, and we would be adjusting strategies all the time if we started to see a gap in the applications. We can't always solve for lending decisions, though. The CDFIs will all kind of pool information. If someone, in a sense, couldn't meet the criteria from one CDFI, that doesn't mean that they couldn't meet the criteria of another CDFI. So there's a little bit of that collaboration amongst the CDFIs that can help more borrowers. But I can just say we'll be very attentive to it, because the major goal of this is to make sure that our minority business owners, and specifically, Black minority business owners, kind of get access to capital, as best as we can provide it.
There's another question here about what ways that organizations like the ones in this particular Zoom network, how can these organizations assist in the outreach or the general education and support pre and post applicants? Meaning, for those that are denied, where do you send them? Or for those who are receiving funds, how can this group of providers support these loan applicants?
Well, the ones that are denied are, again, we've got a set of TA providers that we're making available. Again, if those businesses have a relationship with other people, I'm not going to interfere with that relationship. It's just not necessarily under contract to me. I mean, once a CDFI makes a loan, most of us in the CDFI world are pretty attentive to our borrowers in terms of kind of post-loan, attentions. Again, depending on where CDFIs have relationships with TA providers. I mean, that's kind of their world. We're not, interfering yet with that world unless we see a gap at some point, then we'll try and help fill it.
And in terms of the outreach, so of course, we're going to send folks to the event in August 3rd. is there a kind of a schedule events of your efforts to get the word out that we can support you in any way?
I don't know yet. We haven't fully detailed, kind of how that work would be. So I'll let you know when we figure it
Great.
out.
Great. Other questions? Okay, so here's one. Let's see. So for will you have a regular kind of reporting on how loan activity happens? Is there a group that you report to, or how can folks stay kind of in the loop in learning the impact of of the Flex Fund?
Well, I mean, we'll be reporting obviously with our lenders and with Commerce. How public that's going to be. To be honest with you, I can't necessarily commit to that, just because of some of the privacy issues. But because of the relationship with the state, we'll be fairly frequent with at least kind of results as we start seeing them.
Great. So a question from Mariah: would you be willing to pay our organizations for referrals that result in loans instead of or in addition to generalized media expenditures?
On the media side, it depends. So if you think your organization could be a key part of a media campaign, then just send me a separate email and I can talk with our communications people. They've been pretty active in Washington State, so they're going to be the ones to make the decision on it. We're not paying referral fees, to be quite candid with you. Most of the Flex Fund is geared to providing low rates to borrowers, to businesses. The CDFIs aren't collecting high interest rates. They're getting some fee income rather than interest earnings on their loans. So there's not a lot of room there to be paying for referrals to a loan program.
Okay, there's a quick question here. Considering current barriers in processing and underwriting for early stage small, mid-sized businesses, are there any unique procedures and/or terms you're providing through the fund? And I guess that would be for Michael.
Yeah, I guess just the way that the fund is set up with the terms and the product being set as it is fairly low cost of funds for a business to get into compared to other products like an SBA product, whether it be a microloan or a 7A. Again, with kind of the abbreviated, shortened underwriting process without a lot of in-depth analysis, without, as Chuck had mentioned earlier, looking at doing other labor-intensive type of lending for like real estate and all that. By keeping it to just working capital needs, it really makes the process quick, easy, and not a very lengthy time. If we start looking at other things, and again, if someone comes in and needs another type of product that doesn't fit within the Flex Fund, that could make the process a little bit longer. It could make it a little bit more labor intensive for a particular borrower because of requirements for documentation, additional financial statements. So again, this has a very, from my opinion as a lender, a very low entry barrier with respect to what's required of a business owner to be able to qualify and get funding in a relatively quick manner at a relatively inexpensive amount of money.
Excellent. That was really helpful. And Renita, I see you have your hand up.
I have a question. So with the nonprofits under the 6 month, the 6 month interest term for 72 months or something like that. So if someone start the process and they have delays, having to get some other things done, do that still count within the 6 months of them applying from the time that they applied through the portal, or when they actually receive the loan? How does that work with the
term? Yeah, the term would be set when the loan closes. So if they applied, but then they needed to go through a lot of work that took them beyond the 6 month window, really that we did June 30th. So really the end of the year. So the loan would close in the first of the year. then they would likely have to stick with the 60-month term rather than 72.
Okay, thank you.
So two-part question. One is how much is in the current loan fund now? And assuming a regular pattern or trend for these loans, how long do you see this loan fund being available?
Well, I think it depends on how hard Michael works. No weekends off, no.
That's normal, Chuck.
He's got a great team, I tell you, over at Business Impact Northwest.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the fund right now is capitalized at technically $105 million because the CDFIs are bringing $5 million to the table, because they're retaining 5% of the loans that they originate. So to be honest, we really have no idea. I mean, now that we're starting to get into the lending decisions, we'll have a better sense probably in another month at what that schedule is likely to look like. Our current models, we had. Well, I know that we're gonna be ahead of our existing financial model, but I really have no idea, to be honest with you, because we've seen more demand than we thought we would have. But once we start converting to loans, then we'll have a better sense of it.
Got it. Super helpful. Any questions? Any final questions for the good of the order? Okay, there's one question here. Can you ask if there is a reporting process?
From the borrowers,
I think this might be, and you may have answered this already. Just reporting. How do we know how things are if the pattern or the rates of loans going to different populations? Just how do we keep in touch with? I'm assuming they can get in touch with us. We'll stay in touch with you. But if there's a more formal reporting process, that would be really helpful for these folks.
Yeah, I would say probably at least quarterly we would be reporting to our lenders and commerce, and then that similar reporting would probably go out as well through that whole kind of WIDA, partner network. I mean, we'll be creating a number of partnerships on the social media side. So I would say at least quarterly, there's going to be some, kind of results of where the fund is at that time that would be out there publicly in one form or the other.
Okay, and one more question. Renita, did you have a question before I ask mine? I know your hand is still up.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't put it down.
Okay, no problem. So Chuck, of the whole of the fund, what percent or what portion is private investors and what part is public funds?
Right now, 30% is public and 70% is private.
Okay, so it's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions before we end this call? All right, well, I want to say thank you humbly. Let's give our speakers a round of applause. Beautifully done, everyone. Thank you, Michael, for coming, and for you, Chuck, for all the work you've done to move this initiative so quickly into the state. And we're grateful to be of support, and we will, you just ask what we can do to support you, we will do this. And thank you for your time. For all of you, if you have businesses that are interested in learning about other CDFIs and how to help your business grow, this event, Fund Your Business Growth, is happening August 3rd, 2021. It's sponsored by the Black-Owned Business Excellence and WSMA and several other partners. The Flex Fund will be one of the many speakers on that panel, including Black-owned business owners who can share their story about their pathway to increase their capacity to grow because of small loans. And so thank you. Without further ado, I appreciate very much both of you. And thank you to all of you who came. We have about 40 people came and another 20 who also registered, who will be viewing this in the future. We will be sending out this webinar, the actual slide presentation that Chuck put together, and then a summary of the chat, so you have all the links that were shared in this webinar. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate your time, and we will see you in the future. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.